Hi Sagittarius, it's Jenny here, ready with your March Tarot Horoscope. So we're just going to be pulling a single card for the month of March and see what's coming up for you. So the first 2/3 of March is the end of Pisces season, and Pisces is the last sign in the zodiac, so it's also the last, it's the end of the energetic year, and then after March equinox we're going to be in Aries season, and that's going to be the start of a new energetic year. So this whole sorry, there's a couple cards there. This whole season, this whole month has a sort of feeling of endings of cycles. Sorry, I'm just throwing cards everywhere. The sort of feeling of the end of one cycle and the beginning of another. So it's kind of like a bit of a New Year's kind of feeling, but instead of the calendar year, it's the energetic year. So we're starting off a new cycle, but we're still finishing up first with Pisces. So there we go. We'll grab that one before I throw more cards on the floor. Okay, Sagittarius, this is what we've got. We have the Three of Hearts reversed. So this is what it looks like the right way up. So we have the scene, there's lots of like reds and dark hues here. We have this figure of a woman kind of captive here, this sort of serpent or monster at the bottom being slain by a knight. And there's big swords here, all of this in the shape of a heart. And it came out upside down like that. Okay, so we're going to see what the Three of Swords has to say for us this month. Okay. Three of Swords, Conscious Love. This is a very powerful card, an homage to love and to the liberating power of the mind. The card depicts a scene from the painting Roger Rescuing Angelica, framed by a big red heart. As ever, the message is ambiguous. Perhaps a great abyss is opening up at the center of your heart, or maybe swords are about to free you from affliction and distress. The picture is based on the classical motif of a battle with a dragon, a black serpent-like monster visible at the bottom of the big heart. The image warns against hurt feelings, old wounds reopened by the sword. The positive message is that whatever problems we may encounter, the weapons of the mind and the eyes of love will enable us to find a solution, in a happy alliance of heart and sword. Most problems arise out of a separation of abstract thoughts and your real feelings. Obsessive views and rigid ideas refuse to be checked against actual experience, paralyzing your mental and emotional faculties. Like a thorn in the side, they are a source of constant pain and irritation. Give love a chance, including a love of truth and honesty. Shed light on your memories and expectations. Do not be afraid of painful truths. All wounds will heal if you tend to them. Practical advice: do not give up. Risk being more honest and authentic. Let go of your prejudice, pretense, and reserve. Feel the great relief that will be yours when your heart is set free again. Okay, so I love this card in this particular deck. In a lot of decks, the Three of Swords is very like negative energy. It's a lot about like betrayal and love, kind of backstabbing energy. And so it can be like a card that just automatically you get afraid of. But there is no like bad or good card or even energy. There's always just sort of shades, light and dark, and possibilities there. So this card is like it kind of has these two main concepts. Like this can either be this like great big travesty, this darkness, this violence, and confusion in love or in emotions, in the emotional realm, but it can also be this clarifying victory, and this ability to use like decisive thought in order to overcome what could be emotional distress and catastrophe, and instead have this triumph. So, and the key here is this alliance of heart and mind. So swords as a suit is the realm of the mind and thoughts and communication, and then there's this element in the heart here of our emotional space as well. And as the card sort of counsels us, a lot of the time it is very easy to split that binary and have them as being opposites that can't work together. So you're either rational and intellectual, or you're emotional, and you can't do both. There's this feeling that, you know, either emotions they just control you, and then they make you out of control, and then, you know, the mind has to like come in and rescue you with rational thought, or there's this other side of feeling like that the mind is always cold and calculating and clinical, and it just can't access or understand like the true loving experience we can have in our emotional realm. But the reality is we are rational and emotional beings, and that they ought to work in tandem and harmonize with each other, that the emotions are this wellspring and this ground force from which our thoughts can come up and arise, because really our thoughts are usually like birthed from our emotional realm, but then also our thoughts are able to then transcend and not strictly be pushed around by our emotions, and then they can turn around and in fact use this decisive clarity to examine our emotions and say, okay, these may be real and happening. Look, it may be true that we are experiencing an emotion, but that doesn't mean that the stories we attach to that emotion all have to be true. So ideally, those two work together in tandem, and this is a really a card of invitation to say that, well, like you may be facing what may seem like a calamity, but the way through is going to be through this union of the heart and the mind, instead of splitting it into this perceived binary opposition. And one of the kind of that principle of how to get there is through truth and honesty and transparency, because that's kind of is like honest, transparent communication is like you can only be truthful if you have acknowledged what your emotions are. If you're in denial of what your emotional state is, then you cannot speak the truth because you don't know it. You have to have an open, honest awareness and an open connection and communication with your own emotional state in order to have a grasp on what's really happening and then be able to communicate it. And then, of course, you need the mind and the power of the ability to communicate, which is the realm of swords, in order to express healthily what those emotions are. So this healthy, honest communication is that union of the heart and the mind, and that's what this invitation is. But as this card is showing, that this is not like, it's not the most happy thing you want to put on a Valentine. Like, there is aggression, there is darkness, there is risk here. And so this is also not a warning, not a promise, but it's an understanding that it's not all feel good, that there is usually a stage of hurt and or wounding that is actually giving us the impetus to communicate authentically. A lot of the time, the thing that moves us is a conflict that forces us to feel that pain and then to want to overcome it in some way, and that drives this need to reach out with others and connect in open honesty. So this card is indicating that at this point in this month, there may be a little bit more of a focus or a highlight on some wounding, and this can be old. This can be old wounds that maybe have been repressed or just haven't had time to be dealt with, and now they're kind of being brought up in the forefront. And it can be new as well, new things coming up that are causing like this harm or this hurt. And as is often the case, it can be a combination of both, where the things that are new and current hurt as much as they do because they are echoes or re-triggerings of previous old woundings. So there's always this opportunity to be examining and trying to take what is present and what is current, and then also understanding the light of our past as well, and not mixing up the two. Like, they are interrelated, but often we can, if we feel the hurts of our past that are really strong and bringing us into a strong emotion or fight or flight, is we can project all of that past pain onto the moment that is now, and then perhaps explode that out of proportion by, if somebody is causing, is behaving to you in a way that's triggering, you can act very reactively in defense of or with the emotional baggage of the past, and respond in a way that is not in right relation to the current issue. But at the same time, that current issue is often an entry point in order to work through old baggage, where you have the opportunity to say, wow, that affected me more than I thought it would. Maybe there's actually something I thought I had dealt with in the past, but it actually now is a chance to be resurfaced, and now there's urgency to deal with it because it's affecting you in the present. So this is like a bit of a chance to examine things that maybe have been swept under the rug, whether it's saying like, I just don't want to deal with that, or more specifically, like a lot of this can feel like, this doesn't quite feel like Scorpio season, back in Scorpio season, where there was a lot of like, that's Scorpio has a lot of like the bringing up of old traumas, dredging it up and throwing it at you and saying, you got to deal with this. This has a bit of that sort of similarity, but it's more like an invitation or allowing you to revisit something you may have just thought it timed out on, like sort of thinking of, oh yeah, like I don't want to bring that up because it's old news and I feel like I'm going to be really just dramatic if I bring it up. Or, oh, everybody expected me to have kind of gotten over this or healed from this, and I actually even feel embarrassed that this is still present in my heart. And so I'm just going to like, I just don't want to bother anybody. So it can be this sort of this welcoming opportunity to say, look, no, like anything that isn't been dealt with, anything that is still causing you some sort of emotional distress is allowed to be brought forward and looked at with grace and compassion. There's no time out on emotional hurt. There's no time when you should just have gotten over it by now, and that you should just feel embarrassed or just suck it up. There is no time for that. That's a story that we tell ourselves, or that's a story that's kind of put upon us. And so this is more, rather than that, like the trauma's coming up and you got to deal with it whether you want to or not. That's more of a Scorpio feeling. This is actually a bit of a gift. So it's less intense. But it can still have that kind of emotional heaviness to it. So I'm just going to bring this into the current astrology of right now. So as again, I said March is up until equinox, March is Pisces season and the ending of this year. So Pisces season is a lot about transcendence and this sort of moving from this earthly plane up into kind of crossing the veil and preparing to transcend into a more kind of cosmic essence as a completion of whatever has been experienced and learned in this incarnation cycle, and then preparing for a new incarnation of grounding back into earth, into this kind of incarnate experience in Aries season again. So this is a really great time to kind of look back over the past year since last March equinox and think about a lot of the lessons or experiences or emotional kind of tribulations that you may have gone through, and examine like what is still present right now, what needs to be tidied up, or this is an opportunity to complete some cycles. And complete doesn't mean and then it's gone and throw it away. It's just closing a loop so that it's not bugging you that there's this thing that you swept under the rug. It's this kind of releasing attachment without necessarily like totally getting rid of the thing. So if this is a emotional story that you have, or a grudge that you have, or a insecurity that you have, or something like that, letting go doesn't mean that that event isn't still there, or that even these triggers or insecurities may still come up, but it's letting go to the attachment of that being a key part of your story. It's letting go of it needing to be so reactive, where like I don't know if you've experienced this, where like there's something that it's like an old tired reflex, where there used to be something that was a very real trauma, perhaps, that whenever something would poke at it, you really like get into that emotional state. But there can be like enough time or enough healing can go by that you're not actually in that heightened state, but it's almost habitual, that you feel an echo of that event happen and you just sort of feel yuck, or you just kind of like react against it, but not because you're actually triggered, but because you're just primed to think that that's the only way that you can respond to that. And this is a chance to say, wait, this might just be a habit now, and in fact I can re-examine it and say, what if I behave towards this trigger not with trauma, but actually with now a positive regard, or a positive acceptance, or a possibility of looking at what good might be from it. Like there's, in kind of the stage of healing, there's an equilibrium of health, of neutrality, and below it, this might be the stages of pain and numbness and depression and anxiety and all of the things that we consider bad or unhealthy. And then this is when we finally get to neutrality, but neutrality isn't excellence. Neutrality here isn't isn't like living a joyful life. So there's this whole realm here of where you can still start to explore having excitement, having ambition, having joy, and this whole realm is something that can be accessed too. So this might be a stage where we may be getting out of this trauma state, but we're still just sort of sitting at a flat line. And this season is an opportunity to say, what if we expanded on the possibility of what these emotional experiences could mean for us, and actually go above and beyond and start to get into realms of health and happiness towards what has usually been something that's been habitually uncomfortable. So this season up until equinox is this possibility of just sort of feeling into the emotions of what may be coming up, and really not gaslighting those emotions, not feeling like you should be over it, but also not like right away trying to jump to the kind of bypassing way of saying, okay, now it's all good. Like not jumping into trying to make the hurt immediately good. This is still a good time in this Pisces feeling of emotion to allow those emotions to be truthfully experienced. And then when we hit equinox, we have an opportunity to transmute it and create something new, where we can either, whether that's a closing out of that cycle of, you know what, maybe all of these wounds and triggers, they just needed to be seen one last time without trying to be fixed. They just needed to be witnessed. I just needed this opportunity to use those swords of the mind to express, either to myself in like journaling or meditation or declaration, just to myself, or to relevant parties or people I feel safe with. It just needed to be seen one last time. And then my attachment to that story can let go. That might be what's happening. And then you can start this new Aries season fresh, where that's no longer a thing. Or this Aries season might be bringing in what has been a previous pain point and alchemizing it into a new creation, where the concept may still be present, but it becomes fuel to create a new story that can then be started at this energetic new year, and can be brought forward and built into something else in the coming year. So it's kind of build your own adventure in this way. But the key reminder here is that the heart and the mind are teammates. The heart and the mind are not opposites. It is not about one taking seat and squishing the other. They should be able to work together or be in tandem thrones and in counsel to each other. They are partners, and that's going to be what's going to help you through and get you through whatever might otherwise be a bit of a heightened emotional time as we kind of transition in. So yeah, the one other thing again is just letting go of prejudice and that pretense and reserve. Sagittarius can sometimes be like really quite holding on to your beliefs and what you believe to be true, usually because you've gone through a really hard earned exploration of what you believe, and so you're pretty solid on your truths. But that can still be a trap of, because you've earned your beliefs, thinking that they're now rigid and always true for everybody. That the cycle is always ongoing of what is true, and what is true for you may be different from others. So just a reminder to not be rigid or too egoic on like what you've held firm to be true. Just sort of hold it a little bit more softly. And I think, sorry, we'll burp there. I think I'll just leave it at that then, because otherwise I could go on about this card for a really long time. So that's that for this reading for March. So I'm just gonna let it go there, but there is a mention that this equinox I'm going to be starting my first of the Pay What You Can series of workshops for each zodiac season. So for Aries season, I'm going to be starting with a tarot and astrology forecast. This is going to be for the collective. It's a general reading, so it's relevant for everybody, not just for one individual sign. And like I said, it's a Pay What You Can, and it's going to be hosted on this here on the YouTube channel here. So I hope to see you at equinox for that. Otherwise, have a wonderful March, Sagittarius.